So we've got David Charley here, who's been nice enough to come and have a talk to us all, and he's been doing some interesting work over many decades up in the Border Ranges on the Bristlebird. But I'll let you maybe just give a bit more of an intro to you and where you've been at to get this far. Thanks, David.
Thank you. Yeah, like Andy said, I've been working up in the Border Ranges since sort of 1988 when I first moved there, and was introduced to the Bristlebird, and fire's always been an interest of mine, so I've sort of been able to link the two, and being there and involved in the project for so long, I've been able to see reality really, not sort of just 3-year bites. I've seen it over 30 years or so. So it's been very useful in that way. I was sort of a ranger with national parks, senior ranger with national parks for quite a number of years until 2004. And then I went out on my own and doing consultancy with mostly private landowners and threatened species management and to state government. So what I've done is, this is a bit of, it's using the Bristlebird as a case study and just talking about using fire in the threatened species recovery process. So it's sort of, it really links in, but it doesn't just apply to the Bristlebird, it applies to a whole range of species that are dependent upon grassy forests, essentially. So these are some of the other species that are in this area and are dependent on the grassy forest. So that one there, Hastings River mouse, fairly bug-eyed, Roman nose, dark patches. This is the eastern chestnut mouse. These are found together in the same sort of habitats. Common dunnart, that's again up in those areas where there's really sparse open grassland with lots of leaf litter and logs and all those sort of things. And none of these occur in rainforest or wet sclerophyll forest. They're all absolutely solely dependent upon grassy forest. And that's the rufous bettong. Again, this is one of my photos. It's from out west, but they're found from sort of, up in central Queensland, that very dry country, to around here, and quite good populations around here. So there's some of the other species, and there's a whole range of others like the arboreal mammals, the yellow-bellied gliders, squirrel gliders, sugar gliders, greater gliders, all of those, masked owls, husker gales. So there's a whole range of species that are dependent upon these grassy forests. That's the eastern bristlebird. I'm going to use this as the focus species. It's called bristlebird because up around, see there, just there near the mouth, there's 3 bristles on the side of the mouth. They're flightless birds. They live in grassy habitats, but they also have to be near rainforest because during fires they retreat to the rainforest or wet gullies. They're about the size of a sparrow. Hopeless flyers, just scuttle along or lift up a little bit, so they can't disperse very well. This is just a quick summary of current status. In the background is sort of typical habitat for them. That's a site in Queensland, the only site in Queensland where they're found nowadays, so there's only 3 pairs. But this is sort of, they're listed as critically endangered under New South Wales legislation, under the Biodiversity Act, and federally under the EPBC Act. Critically endangered means there's virtually none left. They're on a severe decline in the population, very clustered in their distribution, and virtually no chance of recovery unless there's urgent action implemented. So just a bit of a summary. There's 3 populations, one right down on the Victorian border, one around Jervis Bay and that sort of area, and then our population up here. And that's sort of centred around Border Ranges National Park. Stable in Queensland, stable at 6 birds, which doesn't mean much. Increasing in New South Wales, northern New South Wales. The last survey, which I've only just done, 34 birds. And then they're all in clusters of territories, so very cool. So central population is now over 2,000 birds, so it's on the increase. And I'll talk about the differences in the two in terms of habitat soon, because it's really relevant to the story. And southern population, same habitat as the central population, and again stable in quite a few birds compared with our populations. as I said, they're highly territorial. Territories are about 2-3 hectares, so not very big. In situations when there are only very few numbers of territories, the territories become quite large, maybe 5 or 6 hectares, but when there are more birds, they shrink down and they're abutting each other and only a couple of hectares. One of the critical things that they breed and are mostly in grassy forests, so which is, you think, oh, there's heaps of that, there should be heaps of them, but it's very specific. So grassy forest, and it has to be adjacent to rainforest or a wet gully, because as I said, when there are fires, that's where they retreat, but within 6 months after a fire, they're back out in the grassy forest. So primary breeding is September, April, but under good seasons they'll go all year, breed all year, and they'll, if they produce one chick, they have 2 eggs, lay 2 eggs. In the wild, only one ever hatches, and usually none survive. So if they do get one out, they only produce 1 chick a year at the most. If the eggs are taken early on, they'll re-nest, and they'll just keep re-nesting till they get one, or the conditions become no good for breeding. That's a typical nest. So in the crowns of tussocks, tussocks have to be really vigorous and standing up. If they're too long without fire, the tussocks collapse, or if they get shaded, they collapse. And as you can see, they're supported by the tussocks, with the stems of the grasses. They never nest. They don't nest in anything else. They're always in grasses. They might be in kangaroo grasses that are in amongst the fallen trees, so the branches are supporting, but they're always in that. And they're always, this is a key feature, it relates to fire, they're always under canopy gaps. The nest, you might get tussocks under the canopy, but they will never nest in those. They always nest in a gap, under a gap in the canopy where there are tussocks. And the nests are always very close to where they've nested in previous seasons. That's a absolutely typical nesting site from now, how you get it nowadays. You can see all the tussocks scattered throughout, a lot of crofton weed, but that sort of density is not a problem. And then you can see over in the back there, there's a wet gully that they can retreat to. And that's a nest. That's actually one where we took the nestlings for the captive breeding program. But that's where the nest was, in that tussock there. That just shows you how they cluster, the territories cluster. That previous shot was in that territory there. This is interesting. Each one of those is a separate pair. Sorry, that is probably one pair there. Well, is one pair. But there's 7 pairs there now, all clustered together, all abut each other, and here, it's actually a fire trail is the boundary between the territories. And they come to that fire trail and the males will sing at each other across it. But as fire was kept out of this site, as fire was reintroduced to this site, this RG1 used to go way up here along the ridge. And as the fire was reintroduced and the fire frequency was increased, they reduced the size of their territory from about 6 hectares down to 2, and they clustered next to the other birds. And this population, when we first started managing it, had 2 pairs, now it's got 7 pairs. And it's absolutely in response to increased fire management. This is the story. This is Glenn Holmes did the initial survey work, 84 to 88. And in New South Wales, there are 68 birds at that time. And all up, there was 120 odd birds. So not a huge number, but quite good. So we thought it was good. One of the recommendations at the time was to exclude fire, because down south in the southern population, the longer you kept fire out there, the better it was, the population went up. The biggest issue is down south they're in heath, up here they're in grassy forest. Heath, if you keep fire out, it just gets denser and denser and they love it. But anyway, the theory was keep fire out. That also coincided, coincided with a really strong anti-fire push in New South Wales, which is followed on from the rainforest decision in 1983, and it was just said we've got to get rid of fire from the landscape. It was an absolute disaster. end of 92, 93, where there was a big wildfire up in Queensland. It took out 15 pairs in one go. Not the fire itself, but the fire management. This fire was encircling the birds. So the back burning in front of the fire just encircled birds and cooked them all. They've never come back. So you can just see what's happening. 2003, absolute decline, something's going wrong. And this year is when we instigated annual monitoring. We thought, what's going on? So in that year there, 96, we started doing annual surveys. They're really easy to survey because they call strongly. 1999, we established long-term vegetation monitoring at 56 belt transects. They're 4 metres wide, 40 metres long. We've got 56 of them. That data there, plus this decline in them, showed us that fire was the issue. There was lack of fire. So we sort of did a big review and sort of tried to decide what the management issues were up in these areas. These are the basic principles that we looked at. We looked at fire management, the frequency of fire, were the fire regimes correct? Remember at that time, the fire regime was no fire, keep it out. The intensity of fire, was it we're relying on management of wildfire or introducing fire less intense? And the extent of fire. Wildfires tend to be big over huge areas, while management fires much more contained. You can manipulate habitats and the vegetation types more easily. And also, was the habitat isolated, which it was, because it's only in a very narrow strip, sort of above 400 metres, right up on the border. Below that, it's all cleared, highly modified, introduced grasses, cattle grazing, all the rest. So these habitats are quite isolated. And then weed management. And this is also linked back to fire management, because the longer you keep out fire, the more weeds you get in there. Lantana, cropping weed, mistflower. And then you've got to look at control methods, using fire, weed, mechanical, all of those sort of things. And we also assessed the impacts of all of these, what was happening. And then also, we had to tie in, was it worth focusing on just one species, or should we look at the broad range? We actually looked at the broad range, those 4 other species critically, like Hastings River mice and the like. And we also looked at all the other things that occurred there, plus the plants. There's a number of rare plants in these brush sephora and things like that occur in these grassy forests. They were declining too, lack of fire. And then right on top of all this was Belmont-associated dieback, BMAD, which over time was just devastating all these forests. And I'll talk about that a bit later. This is just to sort of set the scene a bit. We set up, Glenn Holmes and the ranger before me set up some photo monitoring points. One thing you've got to remember with long-term vegetation monitoring, you've got to make it simple, otherwise it doesn't get done. So what we did, we just did very simple, they did and I continued it on, very simple, steel post, northeast, southwest photos, and initially we took some basic data on fuel loads and things like that. But this has turned out to be the simplest and most valuable information. Now, just down the bottom there, 103 territories in the northern population, 22 in this general area, which is only about 400 hectares in size. It's one part of border ranges. That's 1985, 2013, exactly the same point, photo point. There ain't no grass, no bristlebirds, no chestnut mice, no Hastings River mice, no Dunards, actually no koalas and things like that either. They've all gone from that site. Another site, again, same sort of population. Where Glenn's standing, just after they were doing this work, they found bristlebird nests just there. So again, 1985, we took photographs 85, 88, 1993, 2013. I'm going back this year to do it. Same site. So that, from grassy, dense, look how deep the grass is, almost up to its waist, to that. There's a sequence of another site. Just shows you 85, 88. This is the critical one. So that one was still getting fire at that stage, or actually the fire was a couple of years beforehand. But you can see 93, this is when the shrubs are starting to come in. 10 years later, that will not burn. You cannot retrieve that.
That's exactly the same.
Exactly this, well, look at the trees. These are from a post, from the top of the post, exactly the same spots. It just illustrates, and we've got heaps of these from the points. Just illustrates it really dramatically what can happen. Most of the sites that we put the posts in cannot be retrieved, they're lost. So we'll never get that habitat back. So, well, and part of the program is we sort of, this develops it a bit, we sort of, once we decide we want to do something, actually I'll just quickly talk about this photo behind. This is another site up there. This has been burnt twice. That side's been burnt twice, that side was only burnt once. You can see the difference. And it was long unburnt prior to that. It hadn't had a fire for 15 years prior to the first burn. And that is what happens if you don't do the follow-up.
It is all within national parks.
And private properties. Yeah. One of the things in those initial days is that the anti-fire thing could be imposed on national parks, because a lot of it came from national parks. I was one of them. But on the private land it wasn't, and that's where the birds survived. If private landowners had not burnt, they would be extinct. They would be gone. So anyway, so this, once we start, we look at the management of grazing on private properties, because you can graze in these areas if it's seasonal and not intense. You can just do crash grazing or seasonal grazing, mostly in winter, which works really well. Especially up there where some areas you've got Sriracha, which is a legume that they plant as fodder. You go up there, it really gets away in summer, but then they crash graze in winter, and the cattle just graze the Sriracha, get it down, the grasses come back. It works really well.
So grazing do the same thing as fire?
Yep, absolutely, yeah. But if it's managed properly, if you just graze, you destroy it. Because cattle love kangaroo grass and all the others. You've got to look at the thresholds. One of the issues with the thresholds now is that for grassy forest, it's 7 to 15 years. You don't burn before 7 and you have to burn after 15. It's totally wrong up here. The recent research by Liz Tasker and Penny Watson is showing that it's 3 to 5 years, the thresholds. And that is what's actually working out. You've got to look at shrub and understory management. That is almost to the stage where you cannot burn it. It will not remove those shrubs unless you have a really hot fire, which then wrecks the canopy. Tussock and grass management, again, the frequency, the timing of the fire, all of that sort of stuff you've got to bring in. Weed management, we'll talk about that. Habitat structure maintenance, you've got to maintain logs and things like that, and clumps of vines. They're really important features, not just for the bristlebirds, but also for the other rats and mice, native mice. Bell miner colonies. It's interesting here, the bell miners are still there and they've reduced in number of matside. Very localised thing, they're out of control elsewhere. They're just, it's the biggest conservation issue in New South Wales, quite frankly. And then you've got to keep going with burn and ongoing management. You can't say, we'll do 2 burns and then we just walk away. It's forever if you want to maintain these things. That's a site that's almost out of control, 2 gone. We've actually burnt that since I took the photo, but you can see what happens. The shrubs come in, the weeds come in, and then the grasses gradually get shaded out. You also get change in the species. A lot of rainforest species are unable to thrive, and if you don't burn it enough, they just keep getting thicker and more stems. There you see. One thing also, we also take in risk and asset protection. And assets are not just houses and fence, they're threatened species and Aboriginal relics like scarred trees and things like that. They're all built into it. And we also build in to the planning maintenance of Aboriginal pathways. So very quickly, we've done 13 private landowners involved, very heavily involved, totally committed. It's really good, and also the national parks, obviously. We've done 10 habitat burns. We were going to do some this year as well, but licensing got out of control. We have to do licenses to do these burns. It's my internal frustration, but anyway. And then we've got to keep going and stay maintaining them. But that's a very typical burn. We sort of generally burn down slope, unless we want it hotter, and then we burn up slope. But very quickly, that's a typical plan we do for a property. You can see the sort of features we look at. Very detailed. We have lots of detailed management, setup, monitoring, all the rest. This is a Bristlebird site. That is a nest site there. We burnt that in July 2015. Really good burn. You can see the scorch height up here is only up to there. It's about 2 metres tall. Down there it's a bit higher, which is good, because we're trying to take out more shrubs down there. But that's that RG1 you might have seen in the territories, that top territory I talked about. They bred there 4 years in a row. Obviously we burnt it, but then 6 months later they were back there. Same site. That's in January 2016. So it shows you how quickly it comes back. And that nest site there is really getting thick. And the next year after that, we took eggs from the nest there. These are some of the things we look at. We have to look at, wildfires. People think, they're not an issue, but they take out the canopy. So they take out all the wildlife in the canopy. Sometimes you might want the canopy taken out, which I'll talk about later. But the problem is you can't control them. Drought times, they can penetrate right through your little strips, your refugia, into rainforests. Can go many kilometres into rainforest as well. And also, fires in drought times can take out all your tussocks. So you can totally change the grass. See, all of those, they're not tussocks, but they're kangaroo grass. But you can see they're in tussock-type arrangements. They just get taken out because in dry times, the mulch layer and the leaf litter layer burns, while in good times they don't. And it also, extremely quick burn, so it can just roar through and go through a lot of steam. So what we do with the property plans, we go through all these, we map the past fire history, we look at the vegetation, that's the vegetation of that site with all those territories. One problem is with the vegetation, private land mapping, the mapping that's been done for private lands is hopeless. The old state forest areas and the national park areas are really good. There's a good example. That little wedge there is correct, but it doesn't extend into the private land. It's correct on that side, that's the national park, that's private. So those things you have to be aware of. You've got to go and ground truth the mapping, but it does give you a broad reference. That's all rainforest there, right through. That's not rainforest, but it's private land. That is rainforest there. So these are the forest types that we looked at for doing burning. And obviously some areas not mapped, but that's good habitat down there, grassy forest. So those are things we look at. Like I said before, we look at fire advantages, fire assets, and the thresholds. This is really important. You're looking at rainforest and permanent water to breaks, because what you're trying to do is look at practical scale management of fire. All of those dots are Bristlebird sites or threatened species across the area, so you can see there's quite a few, so we have to take those into account as well. We look at fire history. There's two different sites. This is the one, that's the one with just the main one. So you can see quite a complex fire history, lots of fires, but most of them, this area's had a few more. The fires went right up until the sort of early 2000s, mid 2000s. But up in here, they all stopped much earlier than that, sort of 20 years earlier. These, you can see 2000, 1990, 1980 is the fire history there. And people got, a couple of fires got away on them, a lot more houses in that area, so they couldn't burn. There are no fire trails, nothing to pull it up, so you can see where it goes. One fire started up here and went down, and all these others have come up this way. But just, there's nowhere to contain them. So fire stopped in 2000, so 18 years ago. So you can see what issues happen there. But generally, so that's what you do. And then, you map the trails and things like that. I didn't put it on that map, but anyway. Again, Bristlebird and threatened species records. Then we broke them up into manageable burn areas. this is, we've actually broken it up into a little bit more. We've got another block in here now. But you can see we break them up based on the fire trails and sort of practical boundaries, so it becomes manageable. Because what we're wanting to do is we want to burn every 3-4 years, depending on season. Now, if we go into a drought period, you might burn every, the next year might be 6 years' time. But if it's a really wet year, you might burn in 3 years' time. Just depends. You've got to monitor. You can't just say 3 years we're going to burn. It's got to be an adaptive thing. But that's why we go into all this background and keep monitoring. We've got monitoring plots in each of these burn sites, so we know what's going on. Some of the photos I'll show in a little while are of this block here. Just keep that in mind. And then so once we broke it into manageable blocks, also we've done it for this property here as well. So they've got blocks that link in, but I just pulled out the one property to show you. There, that one. So then we sort of have the same management blocks, and we look at the sequencing, so we make sure that a whole area, that we don't burn all of that in one go. So, you know, you can see 2018, 19, 2020. So you've got a sequence going around there. So by the time that one's burnt, that'll be a year or so before we burn that one again, and around we go. See, that we wanted to burn that this year, but we couldn't. And again, with this one, this is a more complex one in a way. We've got this, depended on the license we got, but from OEH, we were going to either burn this whole lot, which we actually got the license for, so we're burning all of that. But the fallback options were 4 little burns down in here, because they focused on the best habitat. And if we didn't look like we were going to burn the whole lot, we wanted to maintain the best habitat in the time we had. Also, you can see where houses are, so you've got to take that into account. Fire trails, access, all that sort of stuff. So that's the sort of the broad planning. So once you decide that, then you, so this area here, so we got that approval to do all that green burn areas, so then we do a burn plan. And this is the practical process where we set out actually how we're going to do it in the visual sense. But there's a huge document that goes with this as well, you know, about 10 pages long. I don't know how people got by in the past with nothing, no paper. But so we do all this, we show the hazards, the risks, all that sort of stuff, where we're going to burn. All these dots are things like where there's water, where there's refuge areas, where there's assembly areas, all that sort of stuff. But that's what we do. We do that sort of quite detailed planning. Same thing with that other one there. That's a simpler burn, so it's a very simple, you know, between 2 roads. That burn there, we're actually, in some parts, we're going to light it off the bottom road and let it rip up, take out some of the shrubs. But that's the sort of planning we do. And these are actually legal documents. You can be, if something goes wrong, you can be pursued over something in that. But by doing all that background, it gives you the best way of positioning yourself to, you know, get an effective and sort of efficient burning. We actually, a lot of these burns under this Bristlebird program is done by consultants up from Queensland. Actually, their job is to do burns. They're fantastic. And some of the landowners are doing them themselves. A lot of landowners now are not used to fire. Back to Andy, they're really scared of fire. So you need, long-term people aren't scared of it. They just light up and they know what they're doing, and it works really well. But a lot of these landowners have never used fire before, so it's a training process for them as well, and so education process, and it works really well. They're just loving it. So then we implement it. So in that burn that territory that I showed you, this burn. We're trying to get this is burning upslope in grassy forest. We're trying to take out some of these acacias because they're almost at the seeding stage, and once the acacias seed, huge volume of seed reserves in the litter in the soil, and when you burn it, they just all sprout, and you go from, you know, maybe 200 little stems per belt transect, you know, 4 metres by 40 to 1,000. And most of those will survive, and they turn into much thicker thicks like that. So what we're trying to do here is burn out some of those, get a more intense fire, burn up slow, take them out. Because that fire burning down, its scorch height will be, maybe that high, while this scorch height here might be 4 metres high. So we're trying to take out the crowds. Same habitat. That fire front that you saw there was there. You might be able to see that photo I took was that line there. So it burnt much more quietly down. It maintained a lot of the grasses there. It didn't burn enough. So we actually went back and reburnt it from the bottom and just took out all of that. But you can see what happened here. Really good burn. It just got everything right back, took out all the weeds, and you're back to things. This is 1 month after the fire. That's a year after the fire, the same site. It's just superb. This is the top end of that site. Just really good grassing. That's all kangaroo grass, and all through it is poa and native sorghums. You can see there's still acacias and things. That's good. We don't want to wipe out everything. We still want to maintain the shrubs because, sugar gliders and squirrel gliders feed on those. They eat the gall, the lost galls. Lots of other species depend on them. They put nutrients into the system. They're just part of the system. So you want to maintain it, but for grassy forest, you don't want it super dense. So so that's the sort of process you can get. That's 3 years after the fire, where that first photo was taken of that fire line. That's one of our transects. We were trying to burn that this year, get back into it again, because you can see you can just see it needs another burn now. This year or next year would be ideal. But you can see really good grassy forest. Birds are in there, breeding, going really well. Now this is the other issue with fire. This site here is further up that ridge where I said the birds had moved out of this area down to all the cluster. This area here, it's been burnt regularly. It's superb habitat, but the canopy has closed over because it was left without fire too long. The trees have got up, the canopy is closed over. There are no canopy gaps. So up in this area, there are no gaps with tussocks and very few tussocks left. They've all been shaded out. So it looks fabulous. And the birds do go up there occasionally, but they're mostly from me back, in the more open forest. So that's what's happening here. You can see the canopy is really dense. A lot of younger stems up in there. And they're all sort of 20, 30 years old, so they've closed over the canopy. And regular management burns won't maintain that. You need a wildfire to get in there, and then you're going to destroy the canopy.
Would thinning help?
That's what we're doing now. Yeah. And this pattern across the whole area is repeated, and areas, seemingly good habitat near rainforest, all the rest is no longer usable because it's all closed in. Looks great. It's got Hastings River mice and things in it, but for bristlebirds and some of the other species, it's no good at all. And so it's eliminated potential nesting sites. So now what we're doing is we need to create gaps. So the next step we're doing is mapping tussocks in these areas. So we're going through GPSing and mapping tussocks. And this is a pilot study just to see if it works. So that took 2 hours to map. So we went through, mapped the tussocks, and also we're mapping the canopies. It looks like there's lots of canopy gaps there, but there's not. That's an old photo, it's all closed in. But it shows you, and those yellow dots, they're nest sites. So you can see they absolutely correspond. That's the site that we burnt, and it's maintained as a canopy gap. So a good, healthy area, and that's that's a dense, moderately dense thicket of tussocks. And tussocks are looking at foxtail. You can't really see it. That's a native sorghum there, and then you've got poa and things like that. So that's a tussock. That's a very healthy tussock that could support a nest. So that's the stage we're doing now. And then, so what we do is we'll do that. We'll map the canopy gaps as well, overlay the two, see if there's remnants of, see that there's no canopy there, but there's tussocks at the different densities. So we might go through and say, well, there's no birds in this area. That's where we might knock out, 50 by 50 of canopy and make a canopy gap, trying to recreate what fire used to do.
With that, could you see this being with more national parks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even opening up canopy gaps?
Yep. Well, the only thing is, in national parks and in a lot of other areas, canopy gaps are being created for us in some areas by bell miners because they're taking up the whole canopy. So in some of those areas, it's shrub management and it's doing the same thing. And in national parks, definitely. Yeah, because it's a threatening process.
Create those gaps, though?
Poison?
There'd be some fair bit of collaboration against
Oh, there will be,
machinery
but
and stuff in-
no, it won't be machinery, and it's very selective and tied into this. We haven't started yet, but there'll be a whole REF process. It'll be years off, but
I mean, like really, to like someone who's forest issue and stuff, it sounds very much like you would manage a state forest and do gap health.
yeah,
I mean,
but
that
much
sounds
smaller
exactly
scale. Yeah,
like
that's
small
right,
scale,
absolutely.
so like-
Yeah, in those areas, it'll be a small scale thing, targeted over tussocks, a whole process. But it's interesting, at a site just over the valley from this, a storm went through in January this year and probably took out 30% of the trees, felled them, and destroyed the canopy, and it's opened it right up, and the tussocks just have exploded. So in those areas, we've got weed management already going. So we're going to make sure we maintain these canopy gaps by just knocking out seedlings that are that size, just before they get up, so we can maintain it. Trouble is with that site too is there are bell miners there, and so now they're concentrated on these really damaged trees, and they'll probably take them out. And linking into that is that it's a really good koala area. So all these trees are being decimated, bell miners are coming in, and the koalas are struggling. It's just so complex.
So you see sort of like more silvicultural techniques being employed as conservation instead?
You can, yeah. Broadly speaking, that's right. Yeah. I always refer to an interesting quandary for people to think about is that when the Simon Ferrier did his PhD on the River Scrubbird, one of his sites was the Border Ranges National Park. He found heaps of them. That was when it was Wainbury State Forest and it was being logged. Logging stopped, which is good up in that area. Logging stopped, but and then in the early 2000s we redid his survey work and went up there. We found virtually none. And someone said, what's going on? We must have done the survey method wrong or something. He came up, he said he couldn't recognise the place because it had all gone from logged areas with really dense undergrowth, which is what they require, below a metre, just hardly walk through it, vines and all the weeds and things. They were loving it. It's all grown up. That's all gone now, and they've retreated back to their natural distribution, which is cyclone-felled trees along creek lines and things like that. So his PhD was, when he did the survey, was an aberration really, based on sort of artificial maintenance and creation of habitat. Anyway, it's sideline. But yeah, so it's becoming to a much more active stage. And the other thing with this thing, it's only in sites where we've got really good grassy forest, but a closed canopy and no opportunities for the birds to use them. And so they're the potential habitat, because we want to reintroduce birds from the captive program. And if, we might have heaps of grassy forest, but if there are no nesting sites, there's absolutely no point in putting the birds back in those sites. So we've got to make sure that we can have places to put them into. So it'll only be in selected areas, but yeah, there will be active management in those early stages. But what we're hoping is, say that's a gap that we create by constant reintroduction and maintenance of a regular fire regime. That'll just be maintained anyway, and it'll only be a one-off thing, and we can maintain it back up. So we look, and with this area here, there's 7 territories there, but you can see 2 places where there are no birds. And we want to map some of this to see if the reason they're not using that area is because there's no gaps corresponding with tussocks. So, this is just a summary where we stand now. So 68 birds, New South Wales. We didn't survey during these years systematically, but we were counting things. started population monitoring then. It's sort of gone up and down. This is when we started the fire program again. That's not an immediate response, but that's when we restarted. And then we really started our really intensive program 2006, 7, and particularly after 2010. So I've been going about 10 years of intensive management, and that arrow should be there, the 18. In 2016, the survey got 18 birds, but there's probably 4 or 5 that we couldn't find because the habitat had just been burnt a month before the burn. And they don't call when they're in their rainforest refuge yet. But you can see there's starting to be a nice trend, and that is probably an underestimate of, well, that's actual birds, and I estimate, based on what we've seen in the last year or so, there's probably another 8 birds on top of that that are still out there, but we didn't pick them up during the survey. So it's an encouraging trend, but we don't know if it's real or not yet. We think it is, because this year we found, between the 2016 survey and the 18 survey, we've got 4 new pairs that were in areas that we surveyed previously and now are turning up. So it's encouraging, but it does generally show that there's a response to imposing a more frequent fire regime. Then, Belmine associated dieback on top of this. This is a huge problem. It's the landscape scale ecological problem of New South Wales, virtually ignored by everyone. Politicians, I mean, people with the money in conservation departments seem to be too hard, but it's destroying tens of thousands of hectares. This site here, remember those photographs I showed you of 1985? That is the same site. So it shows you this understory of regrowth that has come since fire has been stopped. Bell miners nest below 2-3 metres, so there has to be a dense understory, but they've taken out the forest. I used to do regular spotlighting transects here. In a kilometre, you could get 15 big gliders, yellow belly gliders, grady gliders, and lots of small ones. You go up there now, you don't get any. They're probably still there. Yellow bellies don't mind dieback areas because they come out at night and they can feed on the psyllids, the little sapsuckers. But everything else has been decimated. Obviously no good for koalas. This used to be good for koalas. Trash. But that demonstrates that pulse of understory regrowth that has come since fire has been stopped. Water ranges in this area, they were there before the 85 surveys. When I got there in 88, they were all down in the wetter gullies in the Blue Gum and Sydney Blue Gum and Floody Gum gullies, really moist sites. There was about 4 sites. Some of those were absolutely trashed, the cannabis were like that, but they were just in those areas there. Then the really key thing is that I and others noticed, after the 94 fire, 94, 95 drought, which was really severe, the birds, the bell miners, came up out of the valley, and they came up onto all these high ridges, and right up over, and they came from the blue gum up into the grey gum and the forest red gum and the ironbark and all of those other forest types. And now they're right across all the ridges in this area. But it was really noticeable after the 94 drought, which is probably when the trees were under stress, so they were sick, so they allowed things to get in, and then the bell miners are not the cause. They help it, but it's the disease of the trees and the structure of the forest that allows bell miners to come in and take off. And logging can do that, but also lack of fire can do that, all sorts of things. It's a really complex problem. But the expansion, approximately 11 years after the last fire in this area, that's when it seemed to take off. And that ties in with that, the sequence of photos I had over time. It ties in with that ageing, roughly. So it sort of all seems to tie in with change fire regimes up in this area. So anyway, And that's site in Queensland, beautiful habitat, still canopy gaps, but it's on a northern slope, it really dries out. That has gone from, I think, 19 pairs to none. And it's still really good habitat, but it's on a dry slope. So, and again, changed fire regimes. It's only in the last 10 years that we've reintroduced fire there, probably the last 6 years actually, and it's starting to open it up again. That the Crofton weed and the shrubs used to be much denser than that, so it might have got to a stage where it wasn't suitable, so they moved. So in Queensland now, you know, they've gone from 70 or 80 birds down to 6, and they're in a little cluster, 3 territories right up against each other.
Could feral animals be contributing to this, or cats?
No, everyone says cats are issues, but we've had cameras out, and when we've monitored nests and things, it's the cuckoos, friarbirds, snakes and rats. These sites have some of the highest small mammal densities in Australia. Well, one site at Border Loop had between 200 and 350 small mammals in 1 hectare that we trapped. So that's a huge number, and all the nests we've monitored, that's what's taken, and carpet snakes. So probably not cats, certainly not dingoes because we're on prey size, maybe foxes, but no proof of it whatsoever. Yeah. Anyway, it's a brief summary, sort of summary.
So does that affect the nesting as well?
Which one?
Carpet snake?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they'll take the eggs and the nestlings and the adults if they can get them in.
What about in-situ breeding that you were talking about?
Yeah, we've got a captive breeding program. They breed really well in captivity. In the wild, like I said, they lay 2 eggs. Only 1 ever hatches. Virtually none survive to fledge. In captivity, they lay 2 eggs. 2 eggs hatch. We don't know what's going on there, because you'd think it's an absolute waste of energy to lay 2 eggs and only let 1 hatch. So, but in captivity, they breed and they breed and they breed.
And have you reintroduced it to the
We had, yes, we were forced to by the Queensland government. Queensland Labor government, they decided they didn't like captive breeding, so they closed all the captive breeding programs. So we had to dump our birds into the wild, just get rid of them. And we think 2 of them survived until 2014. We don't know since. We know we radio tagged them, but because they're small birds, we could only track them for about a month. We know 2 were taken within a week. 1 was taken by a quail, and we think the other one was taken by a bird, like a goshawk. We have no idea what happened to the others. So what we're doing is it's all changed again now. So New South Wales OEH, Environment and Heritage, are really strongly funding it, massive amounts of money. And if it wasn't for them, they'd be extinct. But they're funding it, and there's a captive breeding program going, and we've run out of aviaries, so we're trying to build more aviaries and get it up because it's going so well. Yeah, and we're hoping to release birds in the next 5 years, and that's why we want to push ahead with this habitat work, so there's somewhere to put them.
But again, the same problem with adults, right?
Yep, always, yeah. But what we're hoping to do is this time, last time we could only put in sort of 2 pairs at each location. What we want to do this time is when Dane Holmes did his survey, they're always in clusters of sort of 7 to 10, 12 pairs. And so we want to replicate that. So we want to be able to dump, 12, 14, 15, 18 birds in one location and let them sort themselves out. And so that way, if 2 pairs produce 2 young, well, at least they can interbreed, pair up and go off they go again. So there's a greater chance. They're pretty good once they get older. They're pretty good at avoiding predators and things like that. I've watched the first ones that have been released avoiding goshawks that were hunting by quartering over the grass. And these birds are giving the alarm call and then ducking down into the grass. And the bird would go over and then they pop up and alarm call and off they go. So they adapt really quickly, and in captivity where they are, they're in a bushland setting, so there's lots of avian predators and other unusual things about them, so they're used to it. So that was one of the intentions.
You mentioned the small mammals.
Mm.
Have you got much understanding about how they've tracked from those early?
Oh, yeah. I should have put a bit more in there. We, at the same time, we set up 6 permanent tracking grids. We set those up in 1999 and they're still going. We only do them once a year just because of resourcing, but still it's consistent over that period of time. And what happened is three of the sites haven't been burnt since the late 90s, and they've turned to like that there. We're actually in that country. In those areas, we used to get Dunart's chestnut mice, and on each plot we'd get between 2 and 5 Hastings River mice, which is really high. And since the burning stopped, it's all been taken over. None of those species are there. Now it's just bush rats, swamp rats, and antechinus and melons. Big numbers, but the others have been pushed out. In the areas that have been burnt more regularly, Hastings River mice are still in them. And we haven't got chestnut mice, but they're always sort of maybe 1 or 2 every trip. So and the Dunarts are occasionally there. So they're still there, just maintaining, but low numbers. They're sort of, there was a student years ago who did his honours up there, and he was trapping Hastings River mice. We burnt one of his plots just before he was going to do a field trip. He went up there and got Hastings River mice 6 weeks after the burn. So, they're a species that adapted to fire, which is very typical Sidonis behaviour and ecology. So, yeah, they just need to maintain this. As long as it's not destructive fire that takes out all the refugia and all the logs and down into the creeks and everything like that. That's the key thing. It's maintaining that sort of level of intensity.
Well, that's kind of fresh from yesterday. We spoke to some Indigenous Burmans. Do you integrate them much?
We do, not so much up here because it's been going much longer, but other sites with Bristlebirds and where we're trying to create habitat, absolutely.
It seems like it's
Yeah, and one of the things very early on when I was first starting the burning program when I was still a ranger, I used to get the elders up there and we'd talk about, we'd go and sit in the bush and talk about the fire pathways and their pathways across the mountain. And it all linked in, basically. It was beautiful, and then they'd show you features that they used to sort of determine when they would burn, and it sort of links in nicely with the Bristlebird, so it's all integrating. So it is being used a lot, actually. Yeah. And a lot of these sites on some of these private property lands were using sort of Aboriginal training rangers in the burning program, which is
one
really
of
good.
the last about the blue culture
Yeah, that's right.
around the paper. We're using that.
Yep. No, you can't get around paperwork. But one of the things the critical thing about this whole project and the way it's been so valuable is that we have had monitoring from way back. So we've had Bristlebird population monitoring, we've had vegetation monitoring that can be done by an individual, not, you don't have to go and chase funding. So, and we've done that regularly over time, and that has fed back into our management. So we don't just say, this is what we're going to do onwards. We actually feeds back in, and that's how we've been able to refine it, and I think it's starting to show results, that sort of feedback process.
Right. Any other questions?
I was just wondering how often or how many times do Bristlebirds breed over a lifetime?
We don't really know. They sort of, well, we've got birds in captivity that are 15 years old and they're still breeding, but we've stopped them in the last year or so. But in the wild, they sort of live for about 8 or 9 years. So you might say they breed at 6 months old. So you might say they get 8 years of breeding. So you might get 8 young out of them. Might. So you need quite a population to have a big response.
Just curious, you were saying that with the Bristlebird
either predated, when it's in the nest, or that's usually full. Occasionally we see a young one with adults following it around, but it's just so rare. It's the nest, because they nest on the ground. I've seen heaps of nests where, there's a tussock with a nest in it, and the next tussock has a rat hole in it underneath the base of it. So, there's not much hope. But that's what they used to do all right. There was a good population here that was maintained during regular burning and all the rest, but now it's crashed to a level where, Queensland, 6 birds, there's one population over in the next valley that's 4 birds. They're not big enough, They produce one young every few years. They just will not be able to get back up. And that's the other program under the captive breeding program, where there's only a few pairs, we're going to dump a whole heap more with them. So then we can build it up. Biggest problem is we don't take birds from the wild, we take eggs or nestlings, so then they re-nest and so they keep going. But you've got to make sure you're mixing up the source birds. We've got some that we go to every year and take the young, because we know where they nest, because they nest within a few metres of the previous nest. So you can go, well, we found a need, go back and you do a grid or whatever, and sit and listen, and you'll see the activity in the farm. So we've got to try to spread the genetics out a bit.
And this bird do anything to protect their nest?
No. They just try to hide it in the crown of a
Makes
tussock.
it so much easier.
Next to a rat hole.
That's it, yeah. One of the things, but down south, they're in heath, but they're in a sort of a similar habitat where in the heath country, there are along creeks and drainage lines where there's really dense vegetation. That's analogous to very dense grass and understory here, but it's heath. So sedges and low stuff about that high. But and keep fire out of that, it just gets better and better, and they breed and breed. And they've moved birds around, dozens of birds, to new locations, and they've just bred and taken off. It's just that here we impose that restriction on fire. If we hadn't done that, we'd still have most of the birds, I would think.
So, would you say it doesn't go with the survival of fittest
No.
species?
Well, it
And
probably does. If we come in and try to manage, it just highlights that you shouldn't do things without monitoring and without knowing what you're doing is correct. You don't have these blanket, no, it's all wrong. You've got to look at each situation as it comes along.
No, I'm asking if we don't help out, if humans don't interfere, and if it goes on how it is going, so it wouldn't survive?
No. You
And
need to
it
interfere
would
in some situations.
come up to the natural selection process.
See, one of the problems, people say, I talk about bristlebirds and they're in grassy forest, and people say, there's heaps of that around. No, there's not. Like I said before, most of the lower valleys, highly modified, introduced grasses, kikuyu and all those sort of things, highly modified, or they're big grassy forests on really dry open ridges that are no good. The habitat is actually really isolated and now found in these small patches. And so, without interference, without fire management, without manipulation of weeds and all the rest, they will be lost.
Really reintroducing people back into the land.
In some of this country,
Really take it.
yeah. Yeah. To a certain extent, you just got to think, what do you want to try to save and what are you managing for? You don't manage for a single species, that's for sure, because then that'll blow away other species and cause all sorts of problems. But you look at priority areas and you look at, here's a suite of species. Bristlebird is the icon species for here, but it benefits a whole range of other things. And then you look at it in detail before jumping into doing things. If things are there, don't change it until you know why they are there.
So what's the ideal fire frequency to maintain?
Up here, in this grassy forest, 3 to 5 years, plus or minus. depends on the season. You can't say, and that's one of the problems with the threshold system. Under the thresholds that are in now, 7, 15 years. But for grassy forests, that's fine for southern New South Wales and places like that. But for up here, no, because things grow so much more quickly. But there's this blanket, so if a landowner up here wants to burn grassy forest, and they say it's Bristlebird in there, they can't until it's 7 years old, but then it might be too long, and they won't be able to get it to burn. That's why there has to be this sort of positive feedback into everything, like the imposition of thresholds and just constantly feeding back. And it's got to be a quick response. It can't be a sort of, we'll review that in 10 years or 5 years. It's got to be, we review it as it comes up, a continuous process.
Have you looked at sites, Bell mining, where you've had Bell mine colonies and you've had capital over the reef, you just fly back and let them do that kind of stuff?
We've only got a sort of anecdotal, really. Some of those, where that cluster of territories was, that had bell miners across the whole thing, and we've burnt and done a lot of weeding, and we've pushed the weeds right. We've done all the wet gullies as well. They're not Bristlebird country, but we're pushing it back just to clean it up, basically. And anecdotally, it looks like the bell miners have moved, and they've moved right downhill. But unfortunately, we didn't do any transects and counted bell miners. And I wish we had, but it wasn't on the radar at that time.
Like just being supposed to do those canopy help come back?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have, but the canopy wasn't that bad in this area. It was because it had a bit more fire. It was still, still grassy forest, so it wasn't as bad. They were just starting to move out. So I think if we probably kept the fire out for another 5, 10 years, the understory would have got really dense and they would have just come in with vengeance. But I don't know. I wish we'd taken done some monitoring, but anyway.
All right. Well, we're going to let you guys go. Well, thank you so much, David. Very interesting talk. So just quickly before you guys go, so there's two things. First of all, there's no shoot now, because I know there's a bit of question that there would be today. So that's going to be next week, the first shoot. And the other thing is, I'm about to put, I'll do it tomorrow morning, put some examples of past students' reports that have done well, so you can get an idea about just seeing how different people have structured their reports. Yeah. It's pretty flexible. I have had a few questions about report structuring. Apart from, it's just a literature review, apart from obviously an introduction and probably a bit of a conclusion, it's really flexible how you structure your headings in the middle, and it's really probably driven by the subject that you're doing, and a lot of the headings will be related to just how you want to put that together for your subject. But anyway, I'll put those, that's loosely speaking, I'll put those examples up. I think I've got some postgrad and undergraduate. But anyway, I'll pop those up tomorrow morning. So there's nothing with the exam yet, but stay tuned. I'll probably run a special shoot like we've talked about before. I'll let you know. Good time. I can't summarise. I'll give you a bit of an overview.
As you said that we take from the government also. So if the government is
No, we